My name is Edward Lancaster, and for 72 years I've lived by one simple rule: a man's dignity is the only inheritance that truly matters. Last night, that belief was tested. It was 2:47 a.m. when my phone buzzed. Half asleep, I opened Instagram, something my granddaughter taught me to use months ago. There he was, my son, Nicholas, in a tailored navy suit, smiling beside a woman in a white gown. Behind them stood her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Aldridge, glowing with pride. The caption beneath the photo said, "With the family who's always been by my side." No mention of me. Not even the word father. I didn't shout, I didn't cry. I simply closed the phone, sat in the silence of my study, and when morning came, I called my attorney. By noon, I had sold the house my son lived in. When the screen went dark, the silence inside my house became unbearable. The clock on the wall ticked with the precision of judgment, each second louder than the one before. 2:50 a.m. I should have gone back to sleep, but the image of Nicholas standing beside that woman, his wife, kept flashing in my mind like a cruel reminder. I reopened Instagram, unsure why I did it, maybe because disbelief can be stronger than pain. I scrolled through the photos again, 25, maybe 30 of them. The ceremony, the champagne, the dancing, the smiling faces. In one picture, Nicholas was laughing with her father, Preston Aldridge, both holding crystal glasses as if they'd known each other forever. In another, Genevieve, his bride, was kissing his cheek while her mother, Vivian, looked on with tears of joy. Tears of joy I hadn't cried in years. But something inside me trembled. I pinched the screen, zooming in, searching for a trace of myself, a reflection in a window, a forgotten shadow, a seat at some distant table. Nothing. It was as if I'd never existed. The caption beneath each post repeated the same nauseating phrase: family, love, and gratitude. The words felt like nails being driven into my chest. Family. I was family once. Gratitude. I gave that boy 40 years of it. I glanced toward the shelf near my desk. On it, a framed photo from decades ago: Nicholas at 7, holding a model airplane we built together. His grin was missing a tooth. My hands in the picture were covered in engine grease from my old workshop, but his face glowed with pride. He once said, "When I grow up, I'll build planes with you, Dad." Instead, he built a life where I didn't belong. I set the phone down again, trying to breathe, but the air felt heavy, thick with something unspeakable: humiliation, maybe. The kind that creeps into your bones and stays there. My late wife, Eleanor, always said Nicholas had her smile and my stubbornness. She used to make excuses for him's young, Ed. He'll come around. But youth is no excuse for erasing someone who gave you everything. The more I stared at those photos, the clearer it became. Every small silence, every postponed visit, every short call over the past 2 years had been preparation for this moment, for my exclusion. I scrolled to the comments, hundreds of them. Such a beautiful couple. The Aldridges must be so proud. A perfect family. Perfect family. My throat tightened. I whispered the words out loud, testing how they tasted on my tongue. They were bitter. Perfect for them, maybe. For me, it was the taste of finality. When the clock struck 3, I stood up. My knees cracked, a reminder that time is merciless even when the heart stops moving. I walked to the window and looked out at the empty street, the dim light of the lamppost reflecting off the frost on the sidewalk. The world outside was sleeping peacefully. Only I was awake, grieving a son who was still alive. I poured myself a drink, not whiskey, just water, and sat back down. The house smelled faintly of old books and cold coffee. It had been Eleanor's favorite smell. She said it reminded her of work well done. I looked at her picture above the fireplace, the one taken before the illness, when her eyes still carried that gentle fire. "You'd understand, wouldn't you?" I murmured. You tell me what to do. But she didn't answer. Only the soft creak of the wooden floor replied. And somewhere deep inside me, something quiet snapped. Not in anger, not yet, but in clarity. By dawn, I already knew what had to be done. When I first saw the house, it wasn't much, just an old colonial shell at the edge of Portsmouth Harbor, weathered by salt and storms. Most people would have walked away, but I saw potential. Eleanor called me a dreamer. She was right. I didn't buy that place because it was beautiful. I bought it because I could see the life that might grow inside its walls, a life for Nicholas. I remember counting every dollar, every blueprint project I finished, every late-night coffee I drank to stay awake while sketching plans for clients who barely remembered my name. 37 years of steady work, 40 years of taxes, and the kind of frugality only a man who grew up during hardship can understand. When I finally had enough to pay for the house in full, I withdrew the money from the bank in 3 cashier's checks and carried them in my leather briefcase, the same one I used the day I opened my architecture firm. Eleanor came with me to sign the papers. She wore her favorite navy dress and held my arm while we walked through the front door for the first time. The air smelled of dust and forgotten dreams, but she smiled and said, "It smells like home already." We spent that summer repairing everything. I replaced the flooring myself, sanded each staircase step, even repainted the shutters a pale gray she loved. Nicholas, then 17, helped me carry lumber and occasionally complained about the heat. Still, at the end of each day, he'd lean on the fence and say, "Dad, one day I'll invite all my friends here. They'll never believe we built this with our hands." He was proud back then. So was I. When Eleanor passed away, I threw myself into finishing the last renovation. She had wanted a sunroom facing the bay. She had sketched it herself, delicate pencil lines on tissue paper, labeled, "For Mornings with Edward." After she was gone, I built it exactly as she designed. I told myself that when Nicholas married, this would be the perfect place for him and his wife to start their life. And when that day came, or so I thought, I handed him the keys. I can still see that afternoon vividly. He stood by the front steps, wearing a wrinkled shirt from his first job at the bank, pretending not to cry. I placed the brass key in his palm and said, "This house is yours to live in. Take care of it." He hugged me so tight I could feel his heart beating. "I'll never forget what you've done for me, Dad," he said. "I'll make you proud." I didn't transfer the deed to his name. Maybe it was superstition, or maybe some quiet instinct told me to wait. The title remained under Edward Lancaster, though Nicholas lived there for the next 6 years, treating it as his own. He repainted the living room without asking, replaced the family photos with modern art, and turned Eleanor's sunroom into a home office. I didn't mind. I told myself it was part of moving on, the young replacing the old. But now, staring at those wedding pictures, I realized what I'd really built. It wasn't just a house. It was a shrine to a father's faith, and that faith had been misplaced. I had poured every ounce of my life into a home where my son could feel safe, seen, and loved. And in the end, he used that safety to erase the man who gave it to him. I ran my hand across the deed folder sitting on the desk beside me. It was still embossed with gold letters, Lancaster Manor property title. My name, clear as ever, at the bottom of the page. That morning, for the first time, I didn't see it as his home. I saw it as my last piece of leverage. Winter came early that year, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. My joints ached, and the house felt emptier than ever. The silence was thick, a kind of silence that hums like static in your ears when there's nothing left to listen for. Days passed, and Nicholas never called. The promised tomorrow after his birthday never came. I kept the phone on the coffee table, half expecting it to light up with his name. It didn't. Then one morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and chills that rattled my body. I thought it was just the cold, but by noon, I was burning up. I took my temperature 102.4. My throat was dry, and every breath felt like inhaling glass. I tried to cook something soup, maybe, but I didn't have the strength to stand for long. The cabinets were half empty. So, I lay down on the couch, wrapped myself in a blanket, and waited for the fever to pass. It didn't. By the second day, I could barely lift my head. My mind drifted in and out of strange, foggy dreams. Eleanor's voice, the sound of the sea, the creak of our old front door. I imagined her sitting beside me again, her hand on my forehead, whispering, "You're not alone, Edward. You're not alone." But when I opened my eyes, I was. I grabbed the phone with trembling hands and called Nicholas. It rang 6 times before he picked up. "Dad?" His voice sounded distracted, impatient. "Son," I croaked. "I'm not well. Fever. I think I need help." There was a pause, followed by the clinking of silverware. "I'm at lunch right now, Dad. Can I call you back?" I coughed hard, the words breaking apart in my throat. "Maybe you could stop by later." "I have a meeting this afternoon," he said. "Drink some tea. You'll feel better." And just like that, he hung up. I stared at the phone, stunned. Drink some tea. That's what my son thought of my suffering, a problem solvable with tea. For 3 days, I lay in bed, the fever rising and falling like a tide. Nobody came. Nobody called. The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall, marking every hour of my isolation. When I finally recovered enough to stand, I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes hollow. I looked like a man half erased. That was when Margaret Haraway, my neighbor from across the hall, knocked on the door. She was a widow, too kind woman, always bringing me soup or shortbread when she had extra. "Oh my, Edward," she said, seeing my face. "You look terrible. Have you been sick?" I nodded. "Better now. Just tired." She sat with me for a while, chatting about her grandchildren. Then she noticed my phone on the table. "Do you ever use that Instagram thing your granddaughter set up?" "Barely," I said. "I don't understand half of it." "You should," she said brightly. "You can see what your family's up to. Here, let me show you." She took my phone, tapped a few buttons, and said, "See? Just type your son's name here." When she left, I stared at the screen. Search. I hesitated, then typed, Nicholas Lancaster. A profile appeared, smiling photo, sunglasses, beach background. But when I clicked it, a message popped up, "This account is private." Private. From me. I sat there, staring at those words, feeling that old ache return sharper, colder this time. Then something dark flickered inside me. I created a new account using a false name, Henry Longfield. No picture, no details. I sent a request. The next morning, it was accepted. And that's when I saw everything. Photos upon photos, dinner parties, vacations, champagne glasses, her family's mansion. All without me. And then I found it. A new post. A white dress. A suit. Flowers. A caption that read, "The happiest day of our lives. With family by our side." My son had gotten married. And I wasn't even worth an invitation. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark with the glow of my phone burning in my hands, staring at those pictures again and again. Nicholas in a navy blue suit, Genevieve in white lace, her parents smiling like royalty. And beneath one of the photos, the caption that shattered me. "With family, always by my side." Family. Not a word about me. Not a single mention of the man who had built the foundation beneath his feet. I looked for myself in the photos, maybe somewhere in the background, maybe a reflection in a glass, maybe an old man seated at some far-off table. But there was nothing. I wasn't just excluded. I was erased. I read the comments until my eyes blurred. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Lancaster. What a beautiful family. The Aldridges must be so proud. And then I saw one from Preston Aldridge, her father. Welcome to the family, son. We're proud to call you one of ours. One of theirs. That was the moment something in me hardened. At dawn, I made a cup of black coffee and stared at the window, my reflection ghostly in the glass. I heard Eleanor's voice in my memory, the one she used whenever she thought I was being too gentle. You raised him strong, Edward. But don't let him use that strength against you. By 9 a.m., I picked up the phone and dialed. It rang twice before he answered. Dad? It's early. Is everything okay? I saw the pictures, I said quietly. Silence. A long, heavy silence. What pictures? He finally asked, but his voice had already betrayed him. The wedding. The one you didn't think I needed to know about. More silence. I could almost hear him exhale through his teeth. Dad, listen. No, I cut in. You listen to me. I saw the ceremony, the guests, the champagne. I saw her parents, front and center. And I saw the caption, with family. Tell me, Nicholas, what does that make me? What am I to you now? A stranger? His tone sharpened. Dad, please, don't start. It was a small event. We wanted something intimate. I let out a bitter laugh. Intimate? With 100 people, a photographer, and a ballroom full of roses? He didn't answer. I wasn't invited because you didn't want me there, I said. Say it. I didn't want it to be uncomfortable, he muttered. For who? I asked. You. Or them? He hesitated, then finally said, Dad, you don't understand. Genevieve's family, they're used to a certain environment. I didn't want. You didn't want them to see me, I said flatly. Dad. You didn't want them to see the man with calloused hands, the man who worked 40 years to buy you a home, the man who carried your future on his back while you slept safe in that house I built. He sighed, the sound of frustration, not guilt. I knew you'd make this dramatic. You always do. You'd guilt-trip me and ruin everything. That's why I didn't tell you. Those words hit harder than anything he'd ever said. You'd ruin everything. He was ashamed of me. Not because I'd failed him, but because I reminded him of where he came from. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. My voice came out steady, colder than I expected. I see. Dad, please, he said, suddenly nervous. Don't take it personally. It's not that I don't love you. Don't, I said. Don't use that word. You don't get to love someone in private and erase them in public. He was silent again. I could almost picture him standing in some luxury suite, phone pressed to his ear, looking out over the ocean beside the wife who thought she'd married above her station. Enjoy your honeymoon, Nicholas, I said. You deserve it. Dad, wait, please. But I'd already hung up. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't even feel broken. What I felt was clean. Like something poisonous had finally drained out of me. At sunrise, I opened the old safe in my bedroom, the one Eleanor and I bought decades ago to hold our most important papers. Inside were birth certificates, her death certificate and one more thing, the deed to Lancaster Manor. I unfolded the yellowed paper carefully, running my fingers over the signature at the bottom, Edward Lancaster, owner. My name. My home. I smiled faintly. Still mine, I whispered. By noon, I was in my lawyer's office, sliding the document across his mahogany desk. I'd like to sell the property, I said. He raised an eyebrow. Your son's home? My home, I corrected. He just forgot who built it. By the time I reached my lawyer's office, the morning fog had lifted, leaving the city drenched in a pale, cold light. The air smelled faintly of sea salt from the harbor. I carried the deed inside an old leather folder, the same one that once held blueprints and sketches of homes I'd designed for other people. This time, it held the only thing I had left that still felt like mine. Mr. Halford, my attorney, looked surprised when I told him what I wanted. Sell it, he repeated. Mr. Lancaster, that's your son's residence, isn't it? It's my property, I said, calm but firm. The title was never transferred. I'm the legal owner. I want it sold today. He hesitated. That's quite sudden. May I ask why? I looked at him, meeting his curious eyes. Because, Mr. Halford, a man can lose a lot in this life: money, health, even love. But when he loses his dignity, he has nothing left worth keeping. He nodded slowly, understanding enough not to ask again. Within hours, he found a buyer, a businessman named Robert Gaines, who wanted the property for his daughter, newly married and eager to move into the suburbs. They offered a fair price, cash payment. No negotiations. It was done by evening. When I left the office, the check in my coat pocket felt heavier than it should have. Not because of its value, but because of what it represented: 40 years of sweat, of calluses, of quiet sacrifices, all distilled into a single sheet of paper. I walked along the harbor for a long time that night, letting the wind sting my face. I thought of Eleanor, of how she would have hated this. She always believed forgiveness was the higher road. But she also believed in fairness. And what my son had done wasn't just ungrateful. It was cruel. When I got home, I sat in my armchair, the old one with the torn leather arms, and turned off my phone. I didn't want to hear excuses. I didn't want pleas. The silence was clean. But by the next afternoon, it shattered. Someone pounded on my door so hard that the walls seemed to shake. 3 knocks. 4. Then a pause. Then more desperate, angry, loud. I knew before I even stood up. I opened the door slowly. Nicholas stood there, pale, eyes wild, hair disheveled like he hadn't slept. His shirt was half-buttoned, his tie loose. Behind him, his car was parked crooked in the driveway. "Dad," he said, breathless. "We need to talk." I stepped aside. "Then come in." He stormed inside, pacing across the small living room like a caged animal. "How could you do this to me?" he shouted. "How could you sell the house?" I sat down in my chair, calm. "How could you get married without telling me?" He froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "That's different," he finally managed. "No," I said softly. "It's exactly the same." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched into every movement. "Dad, that house was my life. My home. You had no right." "I had every right," I said. "It was my name on the deed. I built it. I paid for it. I gave it to you because I believed you'd remember what it stood for. But you didn't." He shook his head, his voice cracking. "I made a mistake. I know that. But you can't just leave us homeless." "Valerie." "Genevieve," I corrected. "Her name is Genevieve, isn't it? Or is it Valerie now?" He looked stunned. "I know about the wedding," I said. "About the family you toasted with. About her father welcoming you into his house like a prize he just bought. About her mother saying you finally had a family who deserved you." "Dad, please," he said, his voice dropping. "You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I interrupted. You were ashamed. You didn't want your new family to meet the man who spent his life covered in plaster dust and calluses. You didn't want them to see where you came from. You wanted to start clean without me. He lowered his eyes. It wasn't like that. Yes, it was, I said. My tone didn't rise, it didn't need to. The truth carried its own weight. You erased me. You closed the door in my face on your birthday, and you left me out of your wedding. You treated me like something to hide. So now, Nicholas, I paused, letting the silence hang heavy between us. Now you'll know what it feels like to be on the other side of that door. His breathing quickened. Dad, I'm begging you. We don't have the money for rent right now. Genevieve quit her job. Her parents. Her parents can help you, I said coldly. After all, your family. He looked up sharply, eyes red. Please. Just give me a month. I'll make it right. I swear I will. I stood. You have 2 weeks. That's what the contract says. I'll help you move if you need it. But the decision's final. He stared at me, tears welling in his eyes. I'll never forgive you for this. That's fine, I said quietly. Because I'll never forgive what you did either. He turned toward the door, his shoulders heavy, his steps slow. When the door closed behind him, the sound wasn't angry or loud, it was soft, final, like the closing of a book. I sat back down, the room still vibrating with the echo of his voice. I expected guilt. I expected regret. But what I felt instead was peace, a peace I hadn't known in years. Sometimes reclaiming your dignity costs you everything: family, comfort, even love. But there are things worse than losing those. Like losing yourself. I looked at the check still resting on my desk and smiled faintly. The house was gone, my son was gone, but my self-respect, that was mine again. For the first time in decades, I felt proud. Not of what I'd built for others, but of what I'd finally done for myself. And as I sat by the window watching the sun sink over the harbor, I whispered to the empty room. Goodbye, Nicholas. Good luck. And thank you for teaching me the value of letting go.